Bethune, reaching up and out and down, catching mankind of every creed and class and color that I can, lifting them to the highest heights to which I can send them.
Mary Jane McLeod Bethune was born on July 10, 1875, in Maysville, South Carolina, to former slaves Samuel and Patsy McLeod. She was the 15th of 17 children and the first one to be born free. Mary was born with a veil over her face. At that time, her grandmother declared that she would be special, but her family could never have imagined who she would become. Mary was always a very helpful child and always eager to learn. She began her formal education at the age of 11 at a local Presbyterian church school. Each evening, Mary would come home and share all that she had learned in reading and math with her parents and siblings. At an early age, she would also use her math skills to help Black farmers be paid fair wages and not be taken advantage. After graduating, she attended Scotia Seminary, now Barber Scotia College, in North Carolina, and graduated in 1893. She then attended Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, graduating in 1895. Shortly after, she attempted to go to Africa to fulfill her dream of becoming a missionary, but the school's board explained to her that they were no longer allowing Black missionaries to go to Africa. Colonization had begun in Africa in 1884, and they feared that recently freed Blacks were not welcomed there. In her response to the missionary board on December 18, 1894, Dr. Bethune wrote, "Indeed, friends and co-workers for the Lord Jesus Christ, I have not been aware of the fact that you have not been sending out colored missionaries to Africa, or I would not have attempted an exception to your rules." Little did she know that God had a different plan for her life. She then returned to her hometown of Maysville, South Carolina, to teach. Soon after, she began teaching for Lucy Craft Laney at the Haynes Normal and Industrial School in Augusta, Georgia. In 1888, while on a teaching assignment at the Kendall Institute in Sumter, South Carolina, she met and married Albertus Bethune, and to their union, one son, Albert Bethune, was born in 1899. Mary was offered an opportunity to work in Palatka, Florida. It was there that she had several surreal dreams about building her own school in Florida. She knew then that Palatka was only a vessel to get her to Florida, but that she had a greater purpose. It was in Florida that she found her niche. Soon, she heard about Henry Flagler building the Florida East Coast Railroad and it coming through Daytona Beach. She also heard that Black day laborers were performing most of the work and that their children would need to be educated. Mary, now 29 years old, decided to move to Daytona Beach to start her school. Dr. Bethune moved from Palatka to her first home in Daytona Beach on 529 Oak Street, where she paid rent of $11 a month. On October 3, 1904, a very determined young Black woman, Mary Jane McLeod Bethune, opened the Daytona Literary and Industrial Training School for Negro girls with $1.50, faith in God, and 5 little girls, and her son, Lena, Lucille, and Ruth Warren, Anna Geiger, Celeste Jackson, and Albertus McLeod Bethune, who later changed his name to Albert. Through Dr. Bethune's lifetime, the school underwent several stages of growth and development, and on May 24, 1919, the Daytona Educational and Industrial Institute was changed to Daytona Normal and Industrial Institute. In 1923, the school merged with Cookman Institute of Jacksonville, Florida, founded in 1872, while it also gained the prestigious United Methodist Church affiliation. Although the merger of Bethune's School and Cookman Institute began in 1923, it was not finalized until 1925, when both schools collaborated to become the Daytona-Cookman Collegiate Institute. In 1931, the college became accredited by the Association of Colleges and Secondary Schools of the Southern States. As a junior college with Class B status, and on April 27, 1931, the school's name was officially changed to Bethune-Cookman College to reflect the leadership of Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune. When Dr. Bethune came to Daytona Beach to start her school for Negro girls, the power structure tried to discourage her by saying, Negroes didn't need any education to become maids and housekeepers. Dr. Bethune replied, let me teach them how to read and write so they can become better maids and housekeepers. She was certainly a strategist and a diplomat. During the early 1900s, Dr. Bethune, while teaching at the Mission School in Palatka, Florida from 1899 to 1903, supplemented her income by selling policies for and becoming the director of the Afro-American Life Insurance Company. That experience made her a firm believer in the value of insurance for everybody and preached its value widely. Aware of her views, one afternoon in 1923, 13 men propositioned Dr. Bethune to join them in incorporating an insurance company. She joined forces with them and became one of the founders and vice presidents of the Central Life Insurance Company of Tampa, Florida. Because of segregation, Daytona Beach was primarily open to whites only. Negroes were only able to visit the beach with a permit and under special circumstances. Dr. Bethune was very disturbed by those restrictions and decided to spend several years searching for the ideal beach location for Negroes. By 1943, she concluded a deal by purchasing 2.5 miles of land for $200,000 north of the Indian River. Bethune-Volusia Beach was incorporated with Dr. Bethune as president. Dr. Bethune experienced great anger and disgust at the lack of medical treatment available to her students and Negroes in the community. Negroes were not allowed to be treated in places reserved for whites. Many times she was told, "We do not take colored people here," or "You will have to go to the back door to be treated." Dr. Bethune would flare into anger and say, "I will never go to your back door." In 1911, Dr. Bethune opened a 2-bed hospital called McLeod Hospital on the campus of Daytona Educational and Industrial Institute. Over the years, the 2 beds became 26. In 1938, Mary McLeod Bethune was appointed by the mayor of the city of Daytona Beach as one of the commissioners of the local housing authority. That appointment was given to her during a time when her community was considered a slum-infested area. Her community asked her to use her influence to get federal funds for a housing project. She agreed to take part in the housing project and decided to call Nathan Strauss, commissioner of the Federal Housing Authority. Unable to reach him, she called the White House and spoke with Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt. She had a long talk with the First Lady concerning funding the housing project. Mrs. Roosevelt had only one question: "How much will you need for the project?" $500,000, Dr. Bethune responded. Action started immediately. On June 25, 1939, ground was broken for the Pine Haven Housing Project. The Bethune Mortuary was established in the 1940s, which was known to be an extremely profitable funeral business. Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune was a close and loyal friend to First Lady Eleanor and President Franklin Roosevelt. At the Southern Conference on Human Welfare in 1938, held in Birmingham, Alabama, Eleanor Roosevelt requested a seat next to Dr. Bethune despite state segregation laws. Roosevelt frequently referred to Dr. Bethune as her closest friend in her age group. Dr. Bethune told Black voters about the work being done on their behalf by the Roosevelt administration and made their concerns known to the Roosevelts. She had unprecedented access to the White House through her relationship with the First Lady. Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune served as advisor to 4 U.S. presidents and held numerous appointments. Calvin Coolidge appointed her to the National Child Welfare Commission in 1928. Herbert Hoover appointed her to the Commission on Home Building and Home Ownership and to a Committee on Child Health in 1930. Franklin D. Roosevelt appointed her Special Advisor on Minority Affairs in 1935 and director of the Division of Negro Affairs of the National Youth Administration in 1936 to 1943, the highest-ranking position ever held by a Negro woman, and Harry Truman appointed her to the Committee of 12 for National Defense in 1951, and as the official delegate to the second inauguration of William V.S. Tubman as President of Liberia in 1952. In 1896, the National Association of Colored Women was formed to promote the needs of Black women. Dr. Bethune served as president of both the Florida Federation of Colored Women's Clubs from 1917 to 1925 and the 12-state Southeastern Federation of Colored Women's Clubs from 1920 to 1925. She and the organization founded a home for delinquent Black girls in Ocala, Florida, and worked to register Black voters, which was resisted by white society and had been made almost impossible by a variety of obstacles in Florida law and practices controlled by white administrators. Dr. Bethune's consensus-building skills ultimately helped her win the presidency of the organization in 1924 when she defeated Ida B. Wells Barnett. After leading the National Association of Colored Women for 2 terms, 1924 to 1928, Dr. Bethune decided that a new, more activist organization was needed. She dreamed of a coalition of women's groups modeled after the mainstream National Council of Women. Facing criticism at the first meeting, Mary McLeod Bethune persuaded the women leaders, representing more than 29 groups, to vote in favor of the organization, thus establishing the National Council of Negro Women, or NCNW, on December 5, 1935, in Harlem, New York. Thus became the founding president of the organization. The mission of the NCNW is to lead, empower, and advocate for women of African descent, their families, and communities. While the organization struggled to raise funds for regular operations, Dr. Bethune envisioned acquiring a headquarters and hiring a professional executive secretary. She implemented this when NCNW bought a property at 1318 Vermont Avenue in Washington, D.C. Presidency provided Dr. Bethune the platform to be heard on major national issues concerning African Americans, which resulted in it becoming the first Black-controlled organization with headquarters in the Capitol. NCNW also established the Afro-American Women's Journal to highlight the work of the organization both nationally and globally. Dr. Bethune led a group of Black women to the polls in 1920 after the ratification of the 19th Amendment. Her contributions to the women's suffrage movement were evident in her rhetoric challenging American society to become a true democracy, as well as in her utilization of institutional spaces to plan, strategize, and allocate resources. She worked through organizations like the National Association of Colored Women and Southeastern Federation of Women's Clubs to support the cause. However, their contributions were systematically stymied as many national suffrage organizations attempted to placate white supremacist Southern suffragists. This did not impede the progress of Bethune in her pursuit of her own form of women's suffrage. Keenly aware of her geographic location and the need for white patronage, she and others navigated a volatile minefield successfully. Bethune's activism through her school's sprawling social engagement also provided interracial space for secret meetings and suffrage work. In 1920, she and Lucy Craft Laney created the Southeastern Federation of Women's Clubs, which galvanized African American women in all Southeastern states. This important work continued to prove necessary even after the ratification of the 19th Amendment, as the political climate throughout Florida and most of the southeastern region precluded scores of African Americans from voting. She joined the protest against People's Drug Store in Washington, D.C. in 1939 for its failure to hire Black clerks in Black neighborhoods, and was photographed at a rally against lynching sponsored by the Southern Conference on Human Welfare. Also in 1939, she wrote a heated letter to Governor Cone of Florida, demanding an investigation after 2 white men who had murdered a black taxi driver were acquitted by an all-white jury. Dr. Bethune boldly chided the governor for his inaction. "What do you have to say about this cold-blooded murder? We appeal for your intervention and investigation. Is there no safety for any colored citizens in this state?" In a newspaper interview, she continued to press for a response from white Floridians. "How long will you kick us and shoot us and burn us without your conscience speaking to you?" Mary McLeod Bethune used her authority as the only female member of President Franklin D. Roosevelt's Black Cabinet and her close friendship to First Lady Eleanor to lobby against segregation and for integrating and allowing the civilian pilot training program to open training programs on the campuses of historically black colleges and universities, and led to graduating some of the first black pilots. Due to her efforts, West Virginia State College became the first black school to adopt an aviation program and receive its first military airplane in 1939, with Tuskegee Institute doing the same later that year. Dr. Bethune personally selected Bethune-Cookman student Charles Bailey, who had enrolled in the Army Air Corps while in Daytona Beach, to transfer to Tuskegee University. He became the first black aviator from Florida to become a Tuskegee Airman. By 1941, Eleanor Roosevelt convinced the Rosenwald Fund to expand the pilot training program at Tuskegee. Early in the year, Roosevelt visited the Tuskegee Institute's Moton Airfield, asking the chief flight instructor, Chief Charles A. Anderson, if he would take her flying. Despite extreme objections from the Secret Service, Roosevelt spent more than an hour flying over the Tuskegee airfield, which was possibly the first time a black man had ever flown a plane with a white woman as his passenger. Upon her return to Washington, Roosevelt lobbied her husband for integration of the country's aviation forces. In December 1942, the president issued Executive Order 9279, forcing all services to officially end restrictions placed on African Americans regarding military service, eventually resulting in more than 5,000 African American commissioned officers, including Benjamin O. Davis, the first African American general. Although Jim Crow laws ruled the day, due to Bethune-Cookman College, Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune and other civic leaders, what was impossible in cities like Jacksonville, DeLand, and Sanford became a reality on March 17, 1946, when the first racially integrated spring training game took place in Daytona Beach. The historical event was made possible in part by Northerners who summered in the area and not only attended baseball games, but they also attended Sunday gatherings to hear music at Bethune-Cookman College, where segregation laws had always been ignored since the college was founded. Branch Rickey worked for years with city officials to have a minor league team in Daytona Beach, and it is likely that he observed Dr. Bethune's political impact and friendship with First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt as an advisor to the president during the Depression and World War II. In 1946, Rickey signed former Negro League star players Jackie Robinson and John Wright. Before Rickey agreed to hold spring training in Daytona Beach with the Dodgers and Royals, he had an assurance from city officials that integrated baseball would be allowed. Bethune and her political allies created the political climate where Mayor William Perry and city manager James Titus chose to make an exception to segregation laws that could be applied to baseball. While in Daytona Beach, Mrs. Bethune met with Jackie and his wife Rachel Robinson to give them encouragement. As head of the Negro Division of the National Youth Administration from 1935 to 1943, Dr. Bethune channeled crucial New Deal funds into black education, secondary, collegiate, and vocational. With the ear of First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt and President Franklin Roosevelt, Bethune was the foremost advocate within the administration for the inclusion of blacks at all levels of government. She joined the NYA's Division of Negro Affairs in 1936, and as director, became the highest-paid Black in government. On the heels of her presidential appointment, she organized the hugely successful 1937 National Conference on the Problems of the Negro and invited a gathering of influential government leaders, including First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, to address the delegates. From 1936 to 1952, she held the largely ceremonial office of President of the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, the organization founded by her friend Carter G. Woodson, considered the father of Black history. Bethune published several important public addresses in the organization's periodical, the Journal of Negro History. She also published her speeches and a regular column in the Afro-American Women's Journal, and later in the renamed Women United, the official voice of the National Council of Negro Women. Through her weekly columns in the Pittsburgh Courier and later the Chicago Defender, her frequent speaking engagements, and her general ability to woo the media, she created a public persona of a life idealized by work, sacrifice, and overcoming poverty and ignorance. Mary McLeod Bethune co-founded UNCF on April 25, 1944, with William Trent and Frederick D. Patterson. The United Negro College Fund is a program which gives a variety of scholarships, mentorships, and job opportunities to African American and minority students attending any of the 37 historically Black colleges and universities member institutions. The organization started in 1944, and by 1964, Trent had raised over $50 million. She served as Special Assistant to the Secretary of War for the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, with a 5-day mission to recruit Black women for Army officer training, and led an extensive campaign to support American forces during World War II, resulting in the purchase of $2 million in war bonds and the raising the SS Harriet Tubman, which was the first Liberty ship to be named after a Black woman. Bethune lobbied successfully for critical African American participation in the U.S. Armed Forces during World War II. Thousands of African American women joined the armed forces, many in the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps and Women's Army Corps, wherein Bethune held leadership positions. These women served in officer as well as enlisted ranks, since Bethune and her colleagues secured approval for qualified African American women to attend officer candidate schools and serve as commissioned officers. When President Roosevelt created the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, or WAAC, in 1942, Dr. Bethune fought for the right of African American women to be included and pressured the women accepted for Voluntary Emergency Service, or WAVES, the organization that oversaw how women volunteered and were commissioned for war, to be more inclusive. As a result, the inaugural class of 436 women included 36 African American women, some personally recruited by her. Dr. Bethune became a special assistant to Secretary of War Harry L. Stimson, and it was her responsibility to handpick the first 40 members of the WAAC. Through her efforts, a second training site was established in Daytona Beach, Florida. 10.6% of the WAAC's positions were supposed to be filled by African Americans, and it was due to Dr. Bethune's persistence that this goal was achieved in the early years. In 1943, she was named the general for this organization at the request of the leader and founder, Livonia Brown, and participated in troop reviews. She delighted in wearing a paramilitary uniform and accepting the honorary title of General in the Women's Army for National Defense. She remained in this role until the war ended in 1945. The Federal Council of Negro Affairs, which she later coined the Black Cabinet, served as an advisory board to the Roosevelt administration on issues facing Black people in America. She served as a member from 1933 to 1945, along with numerous talented Black men, who had been appointed to positions across multiple federal agencies. This was the first collective of Black people working in higher positions in government. It suggested to voters that the Roosevelt administration cared about Black concerns. The group gathered in Bethune's office or apartment and met informally, rarely keeping minutes. Although as advisors, they did not directly create public policy, they were viewed as respected leadership among Black voters. They influenced political appointments and disbursement of funds to organizations that would benefit Black people. Mary McLeod Bethune, representing the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People with W.E.B. Du Bois and Walter White, was appointed by President Harry S. Truman to attend the founding conference of the United Nations in San Francisco in 1945. She was the only woman of color present. After leaving Bethune-Cookman College as president in 1942, she took up residence at the National Association of Colored Women headquarters in Washington in 1943 and lived there for several years. She served on numerous associations and boards, traveled the country giving speeches, and continued to advise presidents, eventually returning to Florida in her retirement to briefly resume the presidency. Dr. Bethune penned The Last Will and Testament shortly before her death at age 79. Dr. Bethune bequeathed her home and its contents to the Mary McLeod Bethune Foundation. Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune's home is located on the northeast side of the Bethune-Cookman campus, west of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. It is a modest, two-story frame house built by African-American architect Mr. A.B. Raddick in 1905. This home was considered a model home for A.B. Raddick. However, he didn't live in the home. In 1913, the home was purchased for Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune by Mr. James Norris Gamble, the chemist who devised the formula for ivory soap of Procter & Gamble, and Mr. Thomas White of the White Sewing Machine Company. This home was the primary residence of Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune until her passing in 1955. Dr. Bethune referred to her home as the Retreat. The home was recognized as a National Historic Landmark by the National Park Service, United States Department of the Interior on December 2, 1975. The home contains fascinating memorabilia and artifacts from Dr. Bethune's life. In addition to the home, Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune's gravesite and memorial are located west of the home on the Bethune-Cookman University campus. In March 1953, Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune's home on the college campus was dedicated as the Mary McLeod Bethune Foundation. The home was dedicated for the purpose of research, interracial activity, and the sponsorship of educational opportunities. The home recalls Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune's many contributions to her family, friends, her church, and her country. Mary McLeod Bethune was presented countless awards, honors, and recognitions. Here are a few of her most inspiring. Dr. Bethune received numerous honorary degrees from various universities. The most distinguished, to name a few, include M.D. Tuskegee Institute, 1937, LL.D. Howard University, 1942, Doctor of Humanities, Rollins College, 1949. Likewise, Dr. Bethune received too many awards to list, but those that stand out include Spingarn Medal, NAACP, 1935, Thomas Jefferson Award, Southern Conference for Human Welfare, 1942, Medal of Honor and Merit, Haiti, 1949, Star of Africa, Liberia, 1952, Dory Miller Award, 1954. Dr. Bethune held membership in the following sororities: Honorary Member, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority; Alpha Chi Pi Omega, Co-Founder; Iota Phi Lambda Sorority; Lambda Kappa Mu Sorority; Honorary President, Phi Delta Kappa. On July 10, 2019, On what would have been Dr. Bethune's 144th birthday, Governor Ron DeSantis officially requested that the statue of General Edmund Kirby Smith in National Statuary Hall be replaced with Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune. Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune will be the first African-American figure to represent a state to be honored with a monument in National Statuary Hall in the United States Capitol, and one of only 10 women to appear among the 100 statues. Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune's parting gift to the world was her last will and testament, which concludes, "If I have a legacy to leave my people, it is my philosophy of living and serving. As I face tomorrow, I am content. I pray now that my philosophy may be helpful to those who share my vision of a world of peace, progress, brotherhood, and love. I leave you love. I leave you hope. I leave you the challenge of developing confidence in one another. I leave you a thirst for education. I leave you respect for the uses of power. I leave you faith. I leave you racial dignity. I leave you a desire to live harmoniously with your fellow men. I leave you finally a responsibility to our young people."
I want to ask that you stand close beside our beautiful school now as the years go by. It's going to need you more in these coming days than even in the past. I want to ask the president of the institution to strengthen himself in his faith, in his vision, in surrounding himself with these wonderful men and women who've been trained in institutions scattered all over this country, to come and give out, both by precept and example, that these thousands of boys and girls that are coming to us during the years might be prepared for the task that is before them. I just want to ask now his benediction upon all those who are interested. Our trustees, our marvelous women of our advisory board, our faculty, our president, our contributors, those who are thinking kindly of us. I just want to ask you to stand firmly by and help us to go on and reach a higher height than I have been able to reach.